Still saying starting.
Action.
Transcription is started. Recording is started. We're away.
Okay. Let's do that again. Hi everybody, my name's Jeff Weir. These days it seems like I talk about Power BI for a living and complain about Power BI for a hobby. I work in Wellington at ACC, which is a private insurer, working on their Power BI, and co-run the user group here. And my kind of interest in Power BI really is as a data visualization coming from Excel days. And today I just wanted to cover a real cool little project I did for a friend of mine, Jordan Small. And I think Jordan's on the call. If you are, Jordan, feel free to say hi.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, bud. How you going? Thanks for making it.
Nice.
And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I did for Jordan, what we did together actually, some of the design process and Power BI functionality that we used along the way, how far I went using the core visuals, why I upgraded them to Zebra BI so I could get a bit more bang for buck. Hopefully I'll find some time to cover off what I think I could do better and what I'm looking at incorporating next. There's going to be a bunch of datavis resources. There's going to be links in the presentation that you can click on that you might find useful. Like I say here, hopefully there's something here that you could implement in your next Power BI project. Whether you should or not, that's another question. Hopefully everybody's managed, if you want to open the live version from this link, which I chucked in chat. And hey, ask questions anytime. I'll try and answer them. Maybe we have to revisit them. Possibly revisiting. I'll just make sure I spelled that right. And oops, why is that there? Sorry, for some reason this box is obscuring this. And if you want to catch me on Twitter, I'm at Insights Machine, or that's my email address there, which you can't quite see. jeff.weir@heavyduty-decisions.co.nz. Cool. Let's crack into it. This is Jordan, whose voice you just heard just before, and Jordan asked me when we were out for a run a few years back now, hey, I need help building a dashboard. Maybe Jordan, you can just jump on and tell us. I mean, these are your words I've got here before, but if you can cast your memory back. And in fact, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll bring up the existing stats dashboard at the moment. Let me just click this. Hey, why isn't that opening? And just to refresh your memory, Jordan, you were trying to get a bunch of data from this dashboard, but weren't succeeding with what you needed to do, right?
Yeah. So I guess what I thought I'd do is just give you a little bit of the sort of client or customer perspective. And my job or my organisation, we're focused on the relationship, the trade relationship between New Zealand and the United States. And one of the core questions I'm always trying to address or answer is, why is this trade and economic relationship important to New Zealand? Why is it special? What's unique about it? And why does it deserve more attention? And so that's a comparative assessment. So, we're trying to answer the special and unique bit. And then it's like over time, we're trying to show the flows, the trade flows, and how that's changing and where the value is. But like Jeff is pointing out, that stats site. Is it up, Jeff? All I'm saying is you.
Is anyone else seeing the stats site? You should be.
Yep, so good to see it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. For a small trading nation, it was really, really hard. Surprisingly hard using the stats site to get that comparative analysis, to get that view of how trade flows are changing over time. So like Jeff said, out on a run, after months of trying to do it myself, basically printing out different views from the stats website, laying them side by side on a big table, trying to get that picture of, how does New Zealand's trade relationship look in comparison with China's or Australia's? And then what you couldn't do was, how is it really changing or how has it changed over the last 5 years, and how does that change compare with other relationships? And so, I came to Jeff and said, can you help? And I know Jeff's going to go through that process, and it really has been a process to reach the product we have today. And it's been iterative, it's been a collaborative process of constant refining, and so backwards and forwards. And for me, it's always been about how do we simplify it, and simplify it for me, who's a non-data person, and then of course my members and the audience for this kind of product. And so, that's been a constant process. We've still got, I think, more work to do there, because as you get into it, you realise.
Wait, what?
Yes. I told you I would lock some future work.
Is this why you wanted to be on the call, mate?
But the constant simplifying and kind of adjusting what it is you need. And so it's been a great process. But let me just finish on what it's enabled me to do in my job, which for me is the most important thing. And that's really to tell the story of the trade relationship, and actually tell it in a more interesting way that goes really below the headline figures, the headline growth figures. So this relationship has grown by 5% over the last, each year for the last 15 years. But to kind of look at what makes up that growth, and to see, what's growing really quickly, what are the fast export categories, what are the growth industries. And that gives me the opportunity to get in front of stakeholders and present a different story, a far more interesting story of the relationship than perhaps they've heard before. So huge value for me and for the organisation in that. Jeff, is there anything else you want me to cover?
Thank you. No, I mean, I think the other thing is that, what's been the impact of COVID? I mean, so it was timely that we started on this before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, this helped us actually work out what was going on. But that's a fantastic introduction. And I look forward to doing that extra bit of work and sending you my invoice for the last bit. Thank you, Jordan.
No worries.
So the cool thing about the stats, the stats dashboard is great, but it's not designed for Jordan's needs. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. But the real cool thing about the stats dashboard is that it's got a download data option. So you'll see here, if you click download data, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can download the data, but you can go to this low level one and get this very low level data that we can download and do something with. And so what I did is I downloaded this data and chucked it into Power BI and spent an awful lot of time trying to make sense of it. And as Jordan said, partly the other reason was also just to compare, especially compare the US against China, I guess, because China often gets a lot of the noise whenever these figures come out from Stats New Zealand, because they're our largest trading partner. And so often our commentators in the media just go to, the numbers like who's the biggest. Great, China have bought the most logs of us in milk powder, but it doesn't necessarily say anything about the quality of the relationship compared to other ones. So that was kind of one of Jordan's kind of briefs, was to tell more of a story. I actually recreated this dashboard this week in Power BI. So this is the same, almost the same as the stats one. And it was really fun to recreate, because it was my first crack at doing kind of a comprehensive smart narrative, which is kind of cool. So you'll see that we've got the ability to look at trade imports versus exports, either on a yearly basis or a quarterly basis. You could choose a country. We can filter by description. We can change the date range. We get a bit of text here, which I quite like, actually. I'm thinking of incorporating something like this into the existing dashboard we've got. And then there's a real quick rundown of top 10, but no trends. So we can see that China's big compared to the US, but we can't really see how that's changing. But a really good start from stats, and just them doing it meant I had the data to take it a bit further. They built it on R-Shiny, which I don't know much about, but Power BI was certainly up to the task of replicating it. And as Jordan said, he spent a lot of time trying to get what he needed out of it. And when you get to the stage where you're cutting and pasting to compare trends, you probably got to reach out and do something a little bit different. And this reminds me of this really cool blog post that I love pointing to by Moritz Stefan. And Moritz is one half of Data Stories. It's a fantastic data podcast. But he also did this great article called "There Be Dragons," datavis in the industry. He's kind of bemoaning the state of it, and he says that these kind of corporate contexts he sees fall into two major categories: number decoration, the kind of thing you'd see on Pinterest, as he says, and the data explorer. And I love this. Let me just put it into. Whoops! I've just lost my cursor. Sorry, folks. I love his description down here. Generic, technology-driven, unfocused, inhumane drop-down orgies where insights go to die. So what we need to do is when we're building something, try not to end up with a drop-down orgy, I guess, where insights go to die. Fantastic article, well worth reading. It's linked when you go through this presentation. You better click on the link and it'll get you to it. As he points out, we need something in between that actually lets people like Jordan do stuff rather than just look at those headline numbers. And this is almost the key point of the presentation. We're going to look at a whole lot of stuff, but this is the point that it turns out that datavis dashboard design is a thing. What's really, really funny is that what generally happens is someone says, oh, great, you've passed your DAX exam, go build a dashboard. But you may have never read a book on data visualization or had real time to read a couple and build a bit of a repertoire. So one of the things I just wanted to point out is that there are some fantastic references that it's worth checking out. I particularly like this big book of dashboards by three folk who are more busy in the Tableau community. So there's a lot of the dashboards in there are from Tableau, but there's an awful lot of really good ideas in that. So it's almost like I don't know, back when I had hair, you go to the hairdresser and you'd look through a book of haircuts and you go, quite like that. So it's a fantastic book. A few others as well, recommend them all. I also saw this recently, I'm going to show this. I saw this a blog post tweet earlier in the week. Someone was replicating the Financial Times Visual Vocabulary Guide in Power BI. So there's a link to this in here. I think it's kind of sets close full screen mode. Oh, sorry, Microsoft. Never mind. Oh dear, that's not cool. Sorry, I seem to have run into fatal flaw. I might need to restart Power BI. That's a shame. You're still there? Yep. Give me a second. Dang. Okay, let's try that again. That's never happened before. Don't want recovered files. Remove the files. Sorry, folks. Okay, so there's a bunch of links here. Check them out if you're interested in some of the stuff I'm going to show you. But the challenge we face with this particular data is really, really tricky because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of categories, a lot of comparisons. People might be interested in categories or countries or both. There's a lot of them. The data was interesting in that Stats New Zealand tend to put all their data in one kind of column, but not tell you that things are double counted, or it's quite hard to tell that things are double counted. And you see an example of the raw data here, where we've got this category called travel that I've filtered on, and it looks like travel, all the stuff comes up to that big number there, but actually this is different levels of a hierarchy all shoved into the same column, just with a code to tell the difference. So we can see there's a kind of level 1 figure, 656, which is over here. These two figures, 624 and 64, are actually level 2. These levels aren't in the data. I just had to construct them by using the codes. And then we see that there's like level 3 data. Some things get split out down to another level and some things don't. So a classic example is personal travel gets split out into education related and other personal travel, but business travel doesn't. So you had this quite complex hierarchy to create. And what makes things worse is things don't always add up. And here's a classic example. When COVID hit, because a lot of this data is captured via surveys, they had to kind of make sure their methodology was still fit for COVID. And in this particular case, obviously, they've done some suppressing because it kind of probably threw their survey methodology into a bit of a tailspin. So in this particular case, you can see these numbers don't add up at all. So if I go back again to Q1, we can see that while we've got all these numbers squished together here, we can work out what's what, and they all add up to the same thing. Here, it doesn't even add up. So we can't actually chuck all this information into a hierarchy and enable drill down and stuff like that. And this actually visually depicts that. The blue line at the top is the stats figures for total of all countries at the total country level, but without breaking anything down by category. But the more you drill down into different levels, the more and more the data is suppressed. So things really don't add up. But tricky data. And working out how to visualize it is tricky too. One of the dashboards I saw out there, in fact, before we went into the stats dashboard, which was done by Ministry of Business and Innovation, I think, used a tree map. And you kind of go, oh yeah, tree maps are pretty cool. You can fit a lot in them. They're efficient use of space. But it turns out that they're not really suited for this type of data. While we can do things like, filter on this live animals category and see who the biggest markets are for live animals and ditto for foodstuffs, or likewise click on China and see where the imports or the exports are. To draw any kind of meaningful comparison requires an awful lot of clicking. I mean, here we're looking at, 5-6 years worth of data. We would have to filter year by year and somehow remember the states in between to see what's going on. And at the same time, and how you're supposed to use tree maps. Tree maps are really designed for hierarchical data. This is the non-hierarchical tree map from the previous page, and this is how it's supposed to look. So the difference is instead of just having live animals and animal products, this is live animals and animal products broken down by these various countries, as all these different categories are. So we often use a tree map when we shouldn't, and even when we use it, we're using it wrong. But even then, this isn't a great way to look at this data. What's more is, because there's so many different points here, we can't even see these things. We have to hover over these things to see what they are, and not all of them even show. What I mean by that is you can see that these are in approximately the same order: live animals, machinery, travel, foodstuffs. Then we get to this vehicles, aircraft and transport, which is missing from here. It's somewhere else. What's happened, and I'm loath to click on this link again, but what's happened is that we've had to suppress the number of categories shown because there's just too many categories here for Power BI. You'll find if you click on these things, you can actually get the same view of country or category. So not a great use, and certainly given the fact that we can't see anything about years. So, and this is just to point out that tree maps are really just square pie charts. So if you wouldn't serve up a pie chart like this, you probably want to think twice about serving up a tree map. There's some really, really good use cases. One we saw just earlier before we started, where SQL BI were using a tree map to show, what took up the most size in a model. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that's what tree maps were originally invented for, was to look at like hard drive space and things like that. But in terms of making comparisons, not great, especially across time. So people inevitably go, oh, okay, I want to see it over time. Let's do it as a stacked bar chart. And this just shows the top 10 stacked over time. And hopefully most of you realize that this isn't really that useful. The reason being is, first of all, it's hideously colored. And second of all, we can only really compare the bottom series because they're the ones that are aligned to a common baseline. Anything else, we have to work really, really hard to see what's going on. So not great, but there's exceptions. You'll find if you click on the links, it'll take you to a couple of interesting articles where we look at some great uses of stacked bar charts or column charts, but not for this particular case, especially given that in the legend we can't even see all these things, right? The legend's too big. So the next kind of step we might go to is a line chart, aka a spaghetti chart. For obvious reasons, it looks like a bunch of spaghetti. And this is an improvement over what we saw last time, because at the very least, we can now actually make out the trends of things. And thanks to the new, the new functionality in Power BI that lets us label our series, we can label some of these series directly. What I mean by that is the series labels. So this is kind of cool. So that's off, on. And the reason that's cool is because it means we can do away with that legend. But we still can't label everything, and it's still a bit of a mess. So it's a bit confusing. And I just want to point out here that the other problem with these spaghetti charts is that the order of your pop-up tooltip does not match the order of the data. The pop-up tooltip here you'll see has Australia, then China, then Germany and Japan. It quickly becomes evident that that's an alphabetical order, whereas the data actually is China, Australia, United States, Japan. So the tooltips make it even harder to see what's going on, unnecessarily so in this visual. And what's worse is that if you've got more than 10 series, God forbid you would, because it would be a real miss, you might not even see the most important series in your tooltip. I also wanted to show that I only found out the other day, thanks to Will Thompson, that you can actually style these differently if you want. So we've got a black background here. You can actually change the background of a tooltip to white, which is tidier, I think, but it still doesn't solve the problem that we've got a mismatch that requires our users to work too hard to work out what's going on. What's cool though is that if we want, we can roll our own tooltips, and this is what this slide shows. So we've got a bunch of the existing tooltips here in the wrong order. And over here, here's one that I prepared earlier. I made some changes to the styling. I thought, well, I'll go for instead of quite a stingy round blob, which doesn't give you much of a swath of color to look at. Here we can actually see what's going on, but more importantly, as you can see, the series in the tooltip matches the order in which they're there. And I'm really hoping that we'll see Microsoft fix this because I think it's broken as it is. And I hope that when they do, I hope we actually see squares instead of dots, just because it gives the user more things to look at. Just so you know how I did this is a pop-up tooltip. So this is actually my pop-up tooltip page, which just has some conditional formatting to format these squares in a blank column and my top 10 list. So that's better.
Did you rank that top 10 list?
I did. So
so you actually had to code for that, right?
And this one, I think I just used the UI, I think, David.
Oh, okay.
So I think
it was simple then.
Yeah, country top 10 by total, really, really easy. So in the filter, people often don't realize this, but there's a whole lot of different filter options in the filter, so we can actually filter on particular countries and manually choose them if we want,
okay.
or we can do some advanced filtering to filter things over a certain value, or we can just say, hey, show me the top, let's go 5, show me the top things by, and I've got a million measures in here, but if I go total, that's the one we want. We can go, show me the top things by total, apply filter. Great, now we've got the top 5. And of course, I just had to sort them descending.
Yeah, okay.
And then we go back over here, and instead of the top 10, we've got the top 5. Now, it's worth pointing out that... What
would happen if one of those lines crossed?
Then one or the other would appear on top. So in other words, if Australia and the United States both said 2235871500, they both still appear there. It's just that I don't know which one would appear on top.
So the pop-up or the tooltip would change according to the new ranked order, depending on where you've clicked.
Yes, kind of. This
Okay.
What's actually happening for pop-up tooltips is this has got the data for all time in it. Actually, great question. Look at these figures. There's 630. What is that? Million?
Yeah.
But if I go over here, they're not 630 million. It gets filtered. So the filter context from the calling visual gets passed to the tooltip, and it says, well, I know that over here you've got no year filter, but here I want you to pass me the 2021 figures only because I'm hovering over 2021 or the 2020. Yeah, cool. Excellent.
Nice work.
It's worth pointing out that these tooltips, these Power BI ones, they need to be redone so that they're better by Microsoft, hopefully, but they're very, very, very fast. The problem with this is you'll see there's a delay. You'll see that as I move, it takes a little bit to even pop them up. And that's the reason for that is we're just generating more queries. So there's nothing without cost in Power BI, right? So great, we can fix the tooltips. Hey, we can actually go one better. We can let users choose how many things to display. This is nothing to do with tooltips. This is just, again, if we've got a top 10 list here, we might go, well, I quite like to see what those numbers 5 to 10 are. So nothing's stopping us just setting up a slicer, a numerical slicer to let us actually choose what we're going to see. And there's a little bit of code here that shows you how to do it. Probably shouldn't have used an if statement. I actually did this 2 years ago now, and I'll probably change some of my code to make it a bit more efficient, but hey, it works. So great, we can let users choose stuff. We can do a cool thing that I saw on SQL BI recently, where we can let users choose the top N things and automatically populate an others category. So, you know, if we want to see the top 5 things and roll everything else into an other category, you bet we can do that programmatically. And again, if you've got the sample file, if you click on this, it'll take you to the SQL BI article where they show you how to do this. I use their simple DAX approach, which isn't optimized, and just made some changes. But all that's happening here is we're taking the fact table, which I've just called fact table, it's not actually called that. We're taking the country field, getting rid of blanks, and we're adding an others category. And then we've got some code over here that says, hey, if the thing we're looking at is the others category, then where is it? Sorry, I'm thinking about this. If it's the others category, then give it to me. Otherwise, do a ranking and just return me dynamically the top whatever that people have used. A little bit complex to go into here, but the DAX code is in the file if you want to have a play around with it. So that's kind of handy. But we also do this, and this is something I was playing around with the other day. I was quite pleased with myself when I got it working. Is the trouble with the spaghetti chart is it's hard to see what any particular series you're looking at. But what if we let users choose how many things to display and let them highlight a series of interest? So that's actually what I'm doing here. I've got it set on 5, but I might go, hey, I want to see 10 things, and I want to see Japan. And this is kind of cool because you'll note down here that there's so many things that Power BI can't fit all the data labels, but we can go through and work out, okay, that one's Thailand, that one's the UAE. Over here, we might want to go, well, that's wood items. What I quite like about this also is that if you change this back to 5, at the moment I've picked the bottom one, 10th one, but if you change it back to 5, it's kind of cool. It keeps the one that isn't in the top 5 in both cases until we click off, and then it disappears from the slicer. There's some pretty cool DAX with this if you get the sample file as well. Again, I'm just getting a table and adding another country called selected, and then just essentially looking for selected. And if it's selected, I'm displaying it. Otherwise, I'm doing a kind of a top end kind of thing. And there's also a visual level filter on the slicer. So the slicer only shows the top 5 or the top 10 things at any particular time. We don't have time to go into the DAX today, but it's kind of a nifty little device, and that's kind of cool. But really, my money's on small multiples for the best way to see this information, and that's what we're looking at here. Small multiples is just a bunch of visuals in a chart that lets you directly compare things, and so it avoids the tangle of lines you get in a spaghetti chart. And even better, because we've broken these things out into different visuals, we can actually have multiple series here. So now we're actually looking at imports versus exports, whereas beforehand we were just looking at one series. If I just go back again, so we're just looking at one series, which is exports and imports. In other words, it's two-way trade. Here we're starting to get some insight out of this. We can see the difference, and we can I can actually change this so that, let's see, if I can make it so that we can see the top 5 things if I wanted, and then I could just change this matrix to ditch these 3 items here if we didn't want to take up that much space in our report, just by going, let me think about this, 2 rows. Great, you know, so we can adjust this so that it fills our matrix completely. I'll just put that back and change that back to 8, I think it was, 8 plus others. Or in fact, you can actually have a button that shows everything. So you see we've got 8 things here plus others, or we've got the whole kit and caboodle. So we've got all the different countries, all the different categories. Again, these things you can that you can do dynamically. Now this, I just want to point out here that Power BI is not very intelligent about how it labels these. I've got it on its auto precision setting, and it's going, oh yes, these are billions, 12, 13, 13. Well, obviously this 13 is different than that 13. So it doesn't automatically go to like 1 decimal point or 2 decimal points as needed. I could force it to display as 1 decimal point, but then it would display that no matter what filters I chose over here. So if I filtered it so that maybe we were looking at millions instead of billions, but if I had told it, well, I want you to show the information as X point Y billion, then it would look kind of silly. The upshot of this is we get down here and these numbers are just bad. You know, 0, 1 billion, 0, 0, 0. We know that there's millions involved here, but the default formatting is not great. So just track for young players. When you're using line charts, it can get a bit messy. So what about line charts and small multiples? So the cool thing about line charts is you can make them quite small, but the downside of them is that it gets a bit messy. But we can use a pop-up tooltip, and we can really make this dashboard 3-dimensional. Again, this is all using native visuals at this particular stage. So the point of this is we might not have much space, so we might actually want to make this really small over here because we might have a whole lot of other stuff around, but it doesn't mean that the user can't get at that information. I'll just hit the undo button. So I'm a big fan of using small multiples as pop-ups from other charts, and you'll see that when we get onto Jordan's dashboard proper. But I'm also a big fan of this kind of layout where we have a small multiples and we have a matrix or a table of some kind, because it really lets us do a couple of interesting things. First of all, it lets us cross-filter really, really easy. So what we're looking at here is on the left here, we've got the top 9 countries plus others. And for this entire date series, 2017 to 221. And down the side here, we've got just the last year's data for different categories. And this allows us to really start getting some insights out of this. Like, for instance, click on travel. Look what happened to New Zealand when we closed the borders. You know, we were getting 2.8 mil export of travel services, which means Australians flying here and spending money, and it just died down to nothing. I mean, I'm not criticising the decision. A lot of us are alive because of it, but this is the economic impact of that. And So I think this is a really cool way, essentially, to allow users to draw down really, really easy. And there's some great insights in this, actually. Like when I first did this, we were playing around, me and Jordan, and we clicked on, where is it? Vehicles, aircraft, and transport equipment. And you see some kind of interesting trends where New Zealand isn't known for exporting aircraft, except in whatever year that was, 2020, we did export a lot of aircraft. And the reason being, maybe I still have the link up here, is essentially we flew a lot to the desert in the US. And sorry, I actually closed the link. I had an article on it somewhere, but I've accidentally closed it. So we can see that obviously we used to import probably quite a few Boeings from the US. We placed an order back then, obviously. COVID hit, boy, did we cancel our orders. And we flew a bunch of these things to the US for long-term storage, and somebody filled them out as an export, obviously for some kind of tax reason or ownership kind of stuff. So you can do some kind of cool stuff with that. And you can also do stuff like set a button up to change the layout. So here we're looking at countries and categories, but there's nothing stopping us having a button to change them around. So we can do stuff like now we can find the US and go, okay, so what's happened to our imports and exports for the US? Well, despite COVID, live animals and animal products has actually gone up. And the reason for that is the US got hammered by COVID and their supply chains and their abattoirs, etc. So we exported a lot of meat to them. Yep, we lost that on travel. We've already looked at the impacts of vehicle and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. But still do better with some of this stuff. For starters, that awful native unintelligent formatting we're looking at. So where we have 2 billion, 3 billion, 3 billion, even though these numbers obviously are fluctuating, Power BI is automatically just doing it to one decimal point. Well, what if we wrote some code that automatically formatted these things? So if I click that onto intelligent formatting, now it'll take a while because it's kind of computationally expensive, but you can see that what we're getting now is we're actually getting decimal points up here, 21.4 billion. And if I was to, in fact, maybe change this to goods or services, maybe that's the better one. In fact, if I cross filter, you'll be able to get to see what we want. I'm just going to cross filter on maybe footwear. Great. It's actually intelligent enough to work out, okay, if it's 1 million, show it as 1 million. If it's 1,000, show it as 1,000. If it's 0, show it as nothing. So this is a real cool thing, a device I've been using recently, using calculation groups. And I'll just show you the DAX. So this is my patented dynamic formatting calculation item to essentially format numbers so they make more sense to humans. And what we're doing is, first of all, we're just excluding any measures that start with the prefix MSG, which is something nothing to do with Chinese food. It's everything to do with something I use for messages. Sometimes I write, sorry, I haven't explained that very well, but I write measures that serve up messages, and I want to exclude these from this formatting. But what we're doing, so we're taking the log of the number to base 1000. And why we're doing that is it turns out that if you take the integer of that and you get a 1, then the thing is 1,000. If you get a 2, the thing is 1,000,000. If you get a 3, the thing is 1,000,000,000, so on and so forth. And so what we can then do is we can dynamically create a string format so that we can format this thing as millions or billions. And we can also do it based on whatever decimal point setting we set here. In other words, we can make it look cool. So again, this is the, oops, let me just go to the intelligent. That's the intelligent formatting. And check the difference in the right-hand side here. What it really does is it just gets rid of a lot of stuff that's otherwise taken up by numbers. This is the unintelligent formatting. This is the intelligent formatting. So that's kind of cool, but a little bit computationally expensive, so you wouldn't want to use it on large data sets. Again, the DAX is here, and I will at some point write up a blog post. So we've made some space in our matrix here. What about adding sparklines? They're all the rage. So I've chucked these sparklines in, and I come to the conclusion that they're not worth the effort. We love to put them in because we go, well, they're really, really good, right? They show us trends and stuff like that. But the problem with sparklines, especially in Power BI at the moment, is there's no option to scale them comparative to each other. So we might get one all the way down here that's got a, let's find a good example, a big uptick, I don't know, construction services, and you go, well, that looks exciting. There's a big upturn down here, but you know, we're only dealing with $12.9 million worth of exports. That's nothing compared to 29 billion. The other thing that I'm not too fond with at the moment is I've put on the automatic marker just to show the maximum value. The problem is I don't know what it is. I don't know what year it is. So I'd quite like to see Microsoft adding better information in the tooltips that talks about what the max is and maybe when it happens. But you know, hey, I guess it's something. So I despite agitating for these things for years, as it stands, I'm not yet a fan. Sorry, Microsoft. So far we've looked at native custom visuals, but now we're going to step into some commercial custom visuals. And this really shows what a provider like Zebra BI bring to the mix. So Zebra BI is a commercial custom visual that you license on a per user basis. And I find that for stuff like this, it's incredibly cost effective because it just helps the numbers to shine. So for starters, unlike Power BI, it lets us highlight the difference and even conditionally format it so we can see the difference between surpluses and deficits. Another thing is that unlike this computationally expensive kind of others algorithm, where maybe I want to show the top 5 plus others, Zebra BI has it baked in, if I can get to it. So users can actually change this. And this is really, really cool if you're taking screenshots. And it also has this intelligent auto tiling. So these tiles aren't guaranteed to be the same size. It's smart enough to work out how it's going to tile these things and get rid of any crap, basically. Very, very cool. I'll just change this back to 8. And again, you know, we can set this up so that we can swap between category or countries. So it gives us, it brings a lot of firepower. I've set these up with small multiples as well, so that I can hover over travel, for instance, and I can see, hey, this is how the travel was impacted across these particular countries. You can also do that over here. I think I've got it done over here. Let me just see. But as you see, it takes quite a long time to render because of this others calculation and because of my smart auto formatting. This thing is lightning fast. These things are very cool. You can also change some of these other formatting options right out of the bat. So we're using a filled area here, but you know, maybe you don't want that. Maybe you just want the lines, maybe a waterfall chart, perhaps not in this particular case, or maybe an integrated variance chart. So I'm a big fan of these. I think they're worth it, especially in Jordan's case, where because we're only using publish to web, they're incredibly cost effective, and I might come back to that a little bit later. The only plea I would have for Zebra BI, I don't know if anyone's on the call, but it would be really, really cool if there was an option in Zebra BI to let you change that others category from being at the end to being wherever it fits in the best. The only reason being is because it actually makes a bit better use of space. This is just a pet little plea to Andre if you're listening. The IBC standard this is based on actually says you should have others at the end, but sometimes I wish I could put it wherever I wanted. You can kind of see the difference. Let's see if we can see the difference here. You can possibly see look at vehicles, aircraft, and shipment is kind of a little bit compressed here, but if we intelligently stick others in height order, it gives us a lot more space. Anyways, it's a very, very minor request. I'm also a big fan of Zebra BI tables, and I use them extensively in Jordan's final dashboard. And just to illustrate the difference, here we're looking at a Power BI matrix versus a table and Zebra BI tables. And I like Power BI matrices and tables, especially because if you put in data bars in these things, you've got an instant bar chart, and you can put as many columns in these things as you want. But the trouble with the matrix is that it gets sorted descending or ascending by total value. We can't separately sort exports and imports. And just to show you, this just has one field in the direction and the columns well over here, direction. We could go, okay, well, that's all right. Let's, instead of using one measure, sorry, a year-to-date measure, instead of using just one measure, why don't we just write separate measures for exports and imports, change this to a table, and then we can sort. And that's kind of cool, except for the massive problem that these data bars aren't scaled across these two groups. So if you look at this number here, this is a $29 billion line item. This one in the imports column is 15.4 billion, but the data bars are the same length. So it's potentially very misleading to customers. Whereas using the zebra BI tables, I get the best of all worlds. So I can sort it descending by grand total, as it is at the moment. So our kind of height jumps around, but exports of live animals is the top thing, and then imports, and then so on and so forth. Or just with one click, I can sort it by exports or imports. And even more importantly, this uses what's called an integrated variance chart. So unlike these ones with the Power BI native visual, we can actually see something about what's going on. What's happening here is if it's green, it means it's growth on last year or last quarter, depending on what I've got here. I think this is yearly data. If it's orange, it's a fall from last year. So we can see again at a glance, we had $1.8 billion extra spend across all our exports for live animals, and a fall of $4.3 billion. Now, you might wonder, why am I using green and orange? Why not green and red? Nothing to do with color blindness. And the reason being is, originally I had red as a fall, but is a fall in travel good or bad? Well, it depends. I mean, it depends for anything, really. I mean, if you're an exporter, you probably want to see falls. You probably do see falls as negative. If you're an importer, you probably see them as positive. So I just found that color a little bit loaded. I thought I'd let it slide for the green, but I didn't want red to denote something that's bad. I mean, in this particular case, it's not great to have a fall of $4.3 billion, but I think you get the picture. So this is kind of where we initially got to with Jordan's dashboard. This was kind of almost the first pick of it. Well, it was quite advanced, but this is what I first went to him with. And one of the cool things about small multiples is that you can see all the constituent parts, but one of the downsides of it is you lose that. Well, what does the whole look like? So this is another cool little trick I did, where I added this button here, just a bit, using a bit of DAX, actually let you change the view from either the country level or the total. No bookmarks required. And the DAX behind this is here, as well as just a little thing that might help explain what's going on. So I made up a new table that looks like this. This is the code that generates it. And we've got this country or total thing in the slicer here. So you either click on country or total. And the selection field is what's actually in this matrix here. So if I've got it on country, the table gets filtered to all these individual countries. And this is the actual country that joins to the fact table. I haven't explained that very well. If we click on total, maybe it's more evident that what's going to happen. So we've got country or total. We've clicked on total. In our matrix, our selection, we've got this total field in our matrix over here where it is total. It's called selection. Only total shows here, so that's fantastic. We're only getting total now, but there's still a mapping to the individual countries. So with a bit of DAX, you can swap your small multiples out to see what's going on in the big picture. And let's dismiss that. Kind of what we needed to do next is just find a way to let users choose what kind of combinations of things they wanted to see. So we've got either annual or quarterly data. They might want to look at trade or trade balance, and they might want to look more at category or country. And the first way we tried it is using this thing that was new at the time, which is the navigation slicer. So you make up a table with all your different country pages in it. Here we're on annual trade by category. You might go, well, I want to go to quarterly trade by category. You hit a bookmark, and it changes the view. What's actually going on here is it's actually navigating us to different pages, but the user doesn't necessarily realize it's happening. So again, we might want to go to annual trade balance. Well, let's go quarterly trade by country, just to change dimensions. And it kind of worked, but it was just kind of painful to choose things from this list. So what we ended up doing is just using radio buttons with some bookmarks in front of them, so that users could jump from wherever they were to somewhere else in one, possibly 2 clicks. So if we're looking at quarterly trade by country, we want to look at annual, it just seems more intuitive just to be able to click on a radio button and it jumps you there. If we want to look instead of trade at trade balance, again, just clicking on the link just takes us there. So that was just an easier thing for users. And Jordan also wanted an overview page. He originally drew something quite simple, and I think he still wants something simple, but I have a way of overcomplicating things. So I'm just going to actually progressively unhide this to show you what we ended up putting in the overview page. So we stuck on a graph there of imports versus exports. So we get to see trade balance, and all these here pop-up tooltips. So again, we can see, this is for the US, we can see what makes that up. He said it would be quite handy to see what's happening to trade as a percentage of all trade. And so, and again, we've got another one of these small multiples here where I can only fit 3 in this visual, China, Australia, and the US, but if you pop up, we get to see another couple as well, and they're busted out as a small multiple. And there's also the ability to, change it from exports, imports, two-way trade if we want. And he was really interested in the difference between goods and services trade. And services trade has taken a real hit because travel is a service. So that's why we've got a bit of a decline here. Again, there's a small multiples pop-up here that lets you instantly compare it to China, Australia, Japan, Korea, so on and so forth. And shock horror, we've got a pie chart. This pie chart just shows what is the breakdown of these last 2 points. In some regards, it's redundant information. It's written here, but visually, it's just a real easy way to see what kind of mix is goods versus services. Brace the pie chart, people. We also did a quarterly view. So what this does is it just takes really the last year's worth of data from this graph and shows it on the quarterly view. And because exports are seasonal, this one we compared it to the same period last year so that we can actually see how things are going versus the same period last year. So that was exports. We also did one for imports. We added a comparison. Like I said, Jordan was very interested in comparing the US to, say, the mix in China or Australia. Now, it's worth pointing out that these 2 graphs here aren't scaled. So you may look at this one and go, well, this line's really, really high. It's probably about the same amount as that. But in reality, one's 12 billion, one's 35 billion. That's by design, but some people would possibly shudder at that. We chucked in an integrated variance chart here, and we gave the user the ability to toggle it between year to date versus the previous year and quarter to date. And you can get a very different picture of that depending on what's going on. So for instance, if I go on year to date, we can see that we've taken a massive hit with travel. If I go on quarter to date, we can see that, well, actually travel is up $2 million this quarter than the same period last year. And we also added the ability to change between that view and look at major changes. So at the moment, we're looking at this year to date, quarter to date, but if we click on that, we actually get more of a drill down into what the major changes are in a way that we can actually make selections. So, you know, we can go, well, what is the major import-export trade since, I don't know, 2020? And let's boost this up to, we'll take this down to 10%. So you can really answer a lot of questions on who are the biggest winners or losers straight from there. And then we just put in, we put in some big numbers in this gap down here. What the rank is for the US, New Zealand in terms of two-way trade, what the exports number was. Again, that's just mirroring the number over here, but it's just makes it nice and easy for people to find it. How many imports and the trade balance. And the layout of this was really dictated just by the data. I wanted to line up these three charts on the left-hand side so that I had the years lined up. I wanted to line up the quarters of these ones. We wanted to have the comparisons with the pie charts in the block. So that really meant that if we were going to have these four big numbers, we had to squeeze them in down this way. And lastly, I think, let me just close that. We also made the whole thing changeable. So he's looking at the US here, but you know, we can change that to Australia and change the whole thing, or China. And we built it as part of the narrative, and we also ordered the slicer. Oh, you can also show all countries as well, so we can see, you know, what the New Zealand Inc. situation looks like. But we've also ordered the slicer from highest to lowest value, so you don't have to go hunting. Now, it's a shame in Power BI that you don't have control over this size of the font here, because that's a little bit larger than I would want. The only reason it's large, of course, is that we have made it match the title. So it really becomes part of the narrative. And we also just put in essentially a bookmark, so you can toggle between this view and the views that we saw earlier. Let me just find where we are in this, and we're almost done. Here we go. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what our trade relationship looks like, and you can certainly see that it's a far cry from what we had before. We really can start to see what is going on with the trade, what's driving it, and what the impacts of things like COVID have been. Again, if I hit travel here, we've got some suppressed data here. It doesn't look so good. Maybe another one like ICT. Oops. I'm in desktop, so it's a little bit more troublesome than the service. So we can really see what's going on. One of the things I'd like to see built into Power BI sometime soon is the ability to conditionally format custom visuals so that I can, for instance, change the colors of exports and imports to match what we have over here. So this is one of the problems I have with this dashboard, apart from my ugly color palette, which I'm probably still using, getting used to. But we've got exports in blue and imports in, what is that, lavender. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's no way to change these bars to match because there is no custom formatting API for these visual types yet. So hopefully that convinces you that dashboard design is a thing. I hope that there's a bunch of different links in here that will help you get more interested and stay curious about dashboards and dashboard making. And I hope that some of the tips and tricks in terms of some of the data modeling just to facilitate users doing things are useful. That's right on the hour. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or to dig a little bit deeper into particular aspects of this that you might be interested in. This is when I realised I've left my mic on mute the whole time. No questions.
I was going to say it was interesting that you, in quotes, broke the rules and still used a pie chart. But it only had two values in it, right? So it was really clear.
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, that raises a good question. I ran out of time to do it today, but one of the things I wanted to do was show that SQL BI others trick and show, you know, if we change it to, I don't know, 4 or 5 things and others, it actually becomes quite useful. I'm just trying to get through there at the moment. And one too many. So what I will do is, when I get a chance, I'll just change this so we can dynamically say, you know, show me the top 5 plus others. There's some great links in this presentation. I think this presentation is worth looking at just for the links. This guy Robert Kosara has a fantastic video on how we actually interpret pie charts, and he's written extensively on them, and he's really fun. He's done a great presentation on them. There's also great articles here from Data Rapper and Storytelling with Data on, you know, when you should use pies, if you should use them, and if you do, what you should do. They get a bad rap, but only because they get a bad rap for the same reason that Excel gets a bad rap. Everybody tries to squeeze too much into it.
I noticed, well, that the absence of the line chart zoom feature. Did you have a look at that?
Line chart zoom feature. What's
so
that?
It puts like sliders on the X and Y axes and lets you manually zoom into your data. It's very probably not that user friendly, but it was just something else that you possibly explored.
I didn't, because it wasn't really out at the time, but I don't really see the point of them. So where do I find the zoom slider? There we go. Let's turn it on. What we're talking about is the ability to do this. It. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Again, it may depend on your data, right?
And again, I mean, the trouble is that everything takes up space, right?
Yeah, it does.
So that just squishes things out. Yeah.
I think it ruins the visual appearance.
Now, Glenn's asked, what is your opinion on the new Zebra BI charts, cards? And I'm glad you asked, because I was going to show what I wanted to do next. And what I want to do next is actually use cards in this. And I actually had a crack at that. Do I still have another file with cards in here? Let me just see here. Zebra BI cards. So what we're talking about is there is a new visual called cards, which are awesome. They replace those kind of square. Let me find the. It's in here. So, oops. These are Zebra BI cards, and I'm just working out how to use them. And I was trying to replace those square blocks I had in the other dashboard. Let me just actually go back there. Quarterly dashboard, and if we go just over here a little bit more, I have to think where things are now. Easiest way to get there is probably via this route. That, and then here. So in the dashboard I currently have for Jordan, we've got these 4 kind of boring blocks. They're kind of, you know, they're useful. But what if we could replace them with something like this? Now, these things are awesome. The only problem I have with Zebra BI cards is they're going to make me redesign my dashboard, because they're so good that I'm like, well, should I be using cards for everything? What I kind of mean by that is, so in my original dashboard, here we've got exports 10.2 billion, imports 8.3, and trade balance. You know, well, different figures here because I've got a slightly different filter on, but we've also got trends in here, and you go, this is fantastic. I've got trends and all this other information in a space that I didn't have, but now it makes this redundant. Likewise for imports or possibly for trade balance. So, whoops, that's interesting. Not sure what happened there. So I need to get into using them more, but I need to work out how am I going to completely change my design aesthetic to do it? And possibly this isn't the dashboard to do it in at this particular stage. Yes, Joanna, the Data Stories podcast is the one with Enrico Bettini and Moritz Stefano. I love that podcast. Christian, I'm glad you like the trick between switching between country and totals. Yeah, I actually have, if I go back to my presentation, I actually had some data modeling stuff. I was going to show you some actual stuff to go along with that. Here we go. We've got a many-to-many relationship, but it doesn't matter for this. You have to have one, and essentially, so this again, this shows just the relationship that we're using. I've got country or total on the slicer, which is just something that says, is this a country or is it a total? If you click total, it populates the selection with a list of countries. No, it doesn't. It populates the selection field with just total numerous times. Otherwise, it populates it with a list of countries. Probably better I show you again. So here's the actual table that gets done. And so we have either the ability to either show totals. And if I have total, then the selection is nothing but total. But we still have a mapping to all the different countries. Whereas if I show country, then the countries show here, and the mapping to the fact table works and brings through the data. It's probably a better way of explaining that. But I can jump to that particular page just again to show you that trick. Where is it? I'll get it from here. Small multiples plus other. No, that's not it. It's just a few down. Maybe? Oh yeah, sorry folks, I forgot the names of all these things. Oh, here we go, country or total. So again, if I go show DAX, this creates the this table over here. We're on country at the moment, and again we've got country or total as a slicer field. So at the moment it's on country, so it only shows countries in here, and for country there is a country for every single row. If I click here to total, you'll see this, it now shows total in the visual. So it's just a real cool way to switch between. Glad you liked it. Fantastic. Anyone have any other questions? Thank you. I'll take that. I thought that was cool. My favorite, I think one of my favorite tricks, actually, there's a couple of interesting tricks, and this one is for the small multiples. This took me quite a long time to work out how to do this, because what we're doing is we're serving up a small multiple with a date table with a date dimension from another small multiple with a date dimension. And what I mean by that is, if you think about it here, I'm hovering over 2021. Normally with small multiples, it would pass that filter to the pop-up tooltip and go, only send through United States of America 2021. And it took me quite a long time to, lots and lots of DAX to realize that I don't think I could solve it by using remove filters and not ruining things with DAX. So what I ended up doing essentially is just having, this is a real ugly data model, but I ended up having two calendar tables. I've got calendar 1 and calendar 2. And so what happens is for my calling visual, I've got calendar 1 on this particular dimension, and for the pop-up tooltip, I've got calendar 2. That way, when I'm hovering over here, it's kind of passing through calendar 1 to the pop-up tooltip, but the pop-up tooltip says, what are you talking about? I work from calendar 2. Would I mind showing the full data model? Yes, I would, because it's embarrassing. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here, some of it that I don't need, and a lot of disconnected tables to let me do some of these tricks. And I'm kind of changing the way I'm doing things, so I'm going to kind of tidy up some of these. But here's our fact table. This is it's just something that, actually, I don't even know what, to tell you the truth, I can't even remember what some of these things do. I mean, here I've got conditional formatting for the color, for the hand-rolled, what was it? I can't think of the word now, but when you hover or something, a pop-up tooltip, a hand-rolled tooltip. So I've got a couple of those. So yeah, it's a little untidy. Many-to-many, yes. There's some many-to-many relationships, and none of them matter. So they're all there on purpose, because for this particular one, like for instance, it's a bit hard to talk through the details without going down a rabbit hole. But country versus total, for instance, if we go and look at that table that did that trick that you liked, we have got every country in here twice. So we've got, I think, let me just double check this. If I filter on United States, for instance, of America, you'll see that it's in there twice. It's in there because we need it to show regardless. Somehow we need to use their figures regardless of whether we're whether we want the small multiple just to show country, or whether we want it to show total. We still want the US data in there. Yeah, it was a union index. That's right. So you've got to embrace the pie chart and embrace the many-to-many in certain cases. Grand. Well, I'm talked out, so I'll leave it there. But I am happy to take any other questions, and like I said, you can catch me on Twitter if you want to say hi or want to know anything else. Let me just go back one. So this is me on Twitter. Insights Machines, the best place to get me. That's my email address there as well. Oops, I don't know why that's doing that. And again, step through the presentation, check out the links. There's some real cool stuff in there. Thanks, Glenn. Great. It seems funny to end a Teams call with just my own voice. Someone say something.
No, thank you, Jeffrey. Jeff, that was awesome. Obviously, a huge amount of work's gone into that. A ton of tips. I'm really pleased we recorded this. As I mentioned, we'll put this up on the YouTube channel and share the link once I manage to crop it all out. So I don't doubt that people will want to just rewatch and jump to various bits to grab some tips. And if you do grab it, let Jeff know. It's always fun to hear that something that you've shared in a session like this has found another home. So please don't be shy and letting Jeff know. I'm sure he'd appreciate that. Otherwise, thanks all for jumping on the call. We've had a wonderful audience from all around the world, actually. Lots of familiar names, but also some new names too. So thanks for all the new people that have jumped on. So and please let us know if you've got any requests for content. As you know, we try to run the last Tuesday of every month, New Zealand time. And also let us know if this time works best for you as well, like after dinner, finish from work. Would love to hear from you. So otherwise, thanks for seeing everyone, and catch you again next month, if not before.
Thanks, Phil. I just realised I finally got my picture up, and I had my hat on seriously askew the whole presentation.
I didn't notice.